Hello and welcome back to the Football Hipsters podcast. My name is Kris. I am your host as always, and we are the podcast that always promises to come to you after certain games and then continuously fails to do so. But, who's counting? Who's counting? You're here tonight, aren't you, listeners? That's what counts. So we are going to be discussing really kind of a bit of a preview pod tonight. We want to look ahead to the last 16. But because we didn't grace you with our presence, the plan was to give you a podcast after each of the the culminative group stage, if you will, after each group game. But the good old people at UEFA didn't give us a break day until now, so we just haven't been able to fit it in. So we do apologise, dear listener, but we're here today, and that's what counts. And when I say we, I shall introduce my fellow guests. I have got Rustling McLana. Lana, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm fine. It's almost like you're a little hedgehog burying away there. It's like little rustle. I've also got the man on the buttons, Mr. Josh Dorr. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Kris. How's it going?
Good, thank you. You are a lot more than just the man on the buttons. It just sounds like a nice, cute kind of phrase, doesn't it? So I'm going to go with that from now on.
That's fine.
And I've also got Mr. Tom Bates. Tom, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. You all good?
Good. Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Surviving and all that. So let's waste no time, boys and girls. Let's jump straight in. So I think where we're going to start really is looking at the brackets as we know how they're going to be confirmed. Now we've got one extremely top heavy side and then one sort of not so quite top heavy side. So on the left hand side of the draw, if you will, we will see Belgium face Portugal, Austria face Italy, or Italy face Austria, that way around if you prefer, France against Switzerland, Croatia against Spain, and then on the right hand side of the draw, Sweden face Ukraine, England face Germany, of course they do, and we've got the Netherlands against Czech Republic and Wales against Denmark. So there is plenty to get stuck into in these draws, and we're probably going to kind of reflect a little bit on the group stages and how they ended up finishing up as we go. So let's start on the left hand side of the draw. Who should I pick on first? Tom, I'm going to pick on you first. Why not?
It's me every time, I swear.
Yes, it's you every time. Belgium versus Portugal. We saw Belgium kind of ease through the group fairly comfortably in the end. I don't really think they were ever particularly tested other than a fairly robust Finnish defence, which they eventually broke down. And Portugal coming through the aforementioned group of death, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that sounds cute, doesn't it? At times, they were bottom of the group last night, then they were third, then they were first, then they were second. Eventually, they got through alongside France and Germany. So, Belgium, Portugal, on paper, it looks quite spicy, this one, doesn't it? What do you make of that particular fixture?
Yeah, I think when I glanced at the bracket, this was the first opening game, bar the England one, obviously, that I thought will be one that I'm 99.9% tuning into. I think both teams, they've got a lot of attacking talent. I think their defensive areas are the slightly weaker parts to their game. And I don't want to jinx it, but it's definitely looking to be, as you mentioned, a spicy fixture. I think there could be quite a few goals in this if both teams decide to absolutely go for it. I'm hoping as a neutral that Portugal aren't going to be as robust at the back as they might like. I'm hoping maybe that Belgium potentially get that first goal so that Portugal are going to be forced to play quite expansive, because I know they can play quite rigid football at times, but they've got the players that can potentially hurt Belgium more than the sides that they've come up against so far. So I can definitely see at least 2 goals in this game from potentially each side, actually, with regards to how solid they are at the back. But yeah, definitely at first glance, this is quite a juicy game in terms of that first round of 16 bracket for sure.
Yeah. So he's got kind of all the makings of the melting pot. Josh, what do you make of this particular fixture? It's in Seville, so it's on that. It's in the sandbox because that pitch is pretty horrendous. Don't know if that might make any sort of impact on this fixture. Do you feel? I mean, Belgium have looked overall pretty good, I think it's fair to say, and Portugal, I can never quite work them out. 1 minute I think they look really good, another minute I sort of think, are they really any good, or is it just kind of Ronaldo and a few bits alongside him? What's your kind of thoughts going into this fixture?
Yeah, I think with Belgium, it's a bit like, I suppose we're going to talk about in a second with Germany, almost like a last chance saloon for this generation of players, especially with Martinez almost certainly leaving at the end of the Euros. I don't know if things like, the temperature in Sevilla, especially at that kind of time, I think 9 o'clock local time, it can be quite hot in June, something like 40 degrees. It's whether or not those players can cope. But obviously, just because a player plays for the Portuguese national team doesn't mean that's where he lives. As I'd say Diego Jota, probably not used to 40-degree heat up in Liverpool or even in the Midlands where he was at Wolves previously. So it'll be interesting how I think they cope with that game, and I wonder if the heat may stifle it a little bit. But it could be one of those Portugal just. I can see they can also outgun as well as just completely just block out teams in my mind. And this Belgium side, I would say flatter to deceive. They seem like everybody who is a fan of the Premier League, Belgium's their second side because it's fundamentally built up of players that you see week in, week out in the Premier League. The fitness of De Bruyne, I think, will be huge for them. And if he can get into the game, I think that would be, absolutely a huge boost for them. But Portugal have shown that they can create superbly, even in the game against France that we just saw yesterday evening in the crazy end to Group F. That Portugal can be a very solid team and play through even some of the greatest midfields on paper. They're still very technical side, and I think potentially another flatter to see for Belgium, and this generation will drop into the likes of the 90s Spain and the early 90s Dutch teams, which looked like they could win everything, but just always seem to choke at the last minute.
Yeah, come up short essentially, isn't it? Yeah. Agreed with that one. Looking at the next fixture, I'm going to give to you, Lana, is Italy against Austria, which is the next one to preview. That one, I believe that's at Wembley, isn't it? It's in London. So yeah, Italy. They're kind of a lot of people's favourites, aren't they? Because they've been pretty impressive. My only slight concern is they've played a lot of fairly average teams for quite a while now. But you being sort of quite a close follower of Juve and keeping a close eye on Serie A, it's a good squad, isn't it? I mean, they've got the potential, and I don't really give Austria much of a hope in this one. So do you see this as a fairly easy path through for the Italians?
I mean, as you mentioned, they've had a really, really good tournament so far. I think it was Tom who mentioned it earlier that they're probably dark horses because no one actually counts on them to do well. But they have such a good mix of old and young that they've collectively really performed well. I mean, Locatelli's been an exciting player to watch. Verratti is back. The defense has been solid, so I don't think it should be an issue. But then again, we shouldn't underestimate Austria either. So who knows?
Yeah, that's probably a fair point. I mean, maybe I've been a bit harsh on Austria there, but I just sort of feel like the way the Italians seem to be physically pumped up for this one, they seem to be very, very set that they are going to take this tournament by storm and essentially just go at teams. And I don't know if Austria can, to use what the kids say, handle the smoke. See, I'm down with the kids, boys and girls. What do you make of this one, Josh? Any thoughts on Italy against Austria? I mean, maybe you can make a case for the defence. Austria were very, very well. I don't want to say bad in the group stage because they weren't bad in the group stage. They had their moments, didn't they? They struck me as a team that, if they really let loose, they might be quite good, but they're almost afraid to let loose unless it's against lesser opposition. And in this game, I kind of imagine they're just going to put quite a lot of players behind the ball.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be showing us again, can Italy break a side down rather than it kind of being getting lucky on the break. For me, I can't really make too much of a defense for Austria getting through this. For me, I think Italy are the favourites for the tie anyway. Whether or not favourite for the tournament, just look at the bracket they're in. It's certainly tricky to make it even to the semi-finals through that tie. So I'll be very interested to just see how that progresses. I think we can mention now that this Euros has definitely been built to try and have a big nation fall out at every knockout stage, and I think the way that kind of side of the group has leveled up is a case of quarterfinals, semi-finals. We're going to see huge nations dropping out that potentially do it undeservedly as well.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good point actually, because like with Italy as well, I wonder how the farther they progress into the tournament, I wonder how they're going to manage being one of the favourites, because at the moment they sort of come into the tournament basically being a team to watch, and they've blown away most of the team. Well, all the teams they played in the group stage, but things change, don't they, when the favourite tag is applied, as England would know.
And the winner of this tie goes up against as you said, the Belgian and Portugal groups or tie. So they're not going to get an easy fixture after this.
No.
That's for sure.
Yeah, because they get the winner, don't they, of Belgium and
and
Portugal. So yeah, that will be a pretty tasty tie. And that will be hosted in Munich. It's to Bucharest we go next, though. And Tom, we've got France against Switzerland. I think probably the neutrals are pretty much going to say that France should be favourites for this game. There is previous. France have beaten Portugal in previous tournaments. I think the World Cup was the last one. I think they hit them for 5, actually, a few years back. But Switzerland are one of those weird teams, aren't they? Again, like just when you think they're dead and buried, they're gone. They perform like they did against Turkey in the last group game, which, to be fair, Turkey were pretty dreadful. But yeah, Switzerland, they've got the know-how. Basically, is essentially what I'm getting at with this one. Do you give them much of a chance, or are you sort of on the France bandwagon of that they are only going to get better as deeper the tournament they progress?
Yeah, no, I think we've still got a lot to see from from that French team, and I think it's going to be. I think this will be a really good springboard game for France to get some confidence, get maybe a 3-goal game here. I can't really look past them, to be honest. I know Switzerland. They can when they show up, they can give a team a good run for their money. I know sometimes with players like Shaqiri, they can pull a goal out of absolutely nothing out of the blue. But I just think the depth of the France team, the quality that they have in the first team, it would take 2 or 3 Lloris absolute shockers for this one to go in Switzerland's favour. To be honest, I think France have just got a little bit too much for them in terms of the quality. But then again, tournament football, I suppose anything can happen. But I think it would have to be such an extreme for Switzerland to come through this game. I'm pretty sure when they won that game against Turkey, they were very happy with the result, and then they looked into who they were playing up next, and then instantly their heart just hit the floor, probably. But yeah, I think you've got to back France for that one for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in the same bracket as yourself. Go on then, Lana. You probably want to have a little input on France. I mean, obviously the game last night was one of the better of the group stages, a 2-2 draw with Portugal. It raised a few questions, but do you feel like this France team are only going to get better, because they need to, really, don't they? They haven't quite clicked into gear as of yet.
No, I mean, it sort of gives me vibes of 2002 World Cup, and then it also makes me feel like, okay, the 2 goals Benzema got, immense pressure off him. It gives him the confidence, because, people talk a lot about how, Giroud has been benched, but it's important that both of them are full on confidence, because we're going to need them going forward. And I think Tom is giving us a lot of credit thinking we're going to score 3, especially given the way Lloris is behaving at the moment. It was flashbacks to Lopez versus Monaco with that, awful kick of his. So I am not confident. As I mentioned in the first podcast, I am still very on the defense, just because we've yet to see much of Mbappe. Worried about how Griezmann isn't utilized to his full potential. But the bright highlight has been Pogba, to be honest. As you know, Tom, he doesn't perform well for United, but he has been amazing for France. And it's just a joy to watch him play. So he's going to be probably our most important player, just because he makes everything tick in that midfield going forward.
Yeah, he really has been excellent, hasn't he? In this tournament, he's just shown to be the player that he can be on his day.
Sorry, Kris. It's a really frustrating thing with Pogba, because obviously following United for so long now and seeing how when he's on his day at United, he's brilliant. But do you think it's to do with that dressing room atmosphere in France? Because whenever you see him with the French national team, I know he's very happy-go-lucky with United anyway, but do you think it's the dressing room effect that has on him, or do you think it's more to do with the system? Because in United, he seems less than half the player that you see. Whenever we see him on telly for France, it's like, why is that the Pogba that you can't get at United? It's almost like chalk and cheese. Do you think there's a particular reason for it, or?
I personally think it's the things he's asked to do at United. I don't think he's essentially carrying a lot of United's midfield, isn't he, on his back, and alongside McTominay. Whereas in midfield, like for example at France, he's got Kante alongside him. So I mean that immediately makes his job a lot easier. I think as well, he's just, Lana might have a view on this as well, but he just always feels very at home in the French setup. He always feels like a guy who looks forward to his international duty, and it's almost like seeing his best friends. And I'm not saying he doesn't have friends at United, but it's almost like he's kind of, his creativity is almost beaten out of him at United, where he's not really allowed.
It's a different culture. I
mean, that's the word. Yeah.
Tom, you have this issue with Pogba. Us as France fans had this issue with Henry, because he didn't perform to the same level for France as he did for Arsenal. So this is also one of the many reasons why he hasn't been much liked in the back in France. And the most amazing thing about Henry is the fact that he only has one assist from Zidane throughout their whole career together for the French national team, which is like insane given how good Zidane was for France. But it just goes to show that some people don't perform as well for the national team as they do for club, and vice versa. I think it's a mix of the players he's surrounded with, the culture, the fact that he's back home. It has a lot to say as well. And he has been under a lot of pressure at United, I assume, as well.
Yeah, sure.
Fans abusing him as well. And it has been a turbulent, couple of years for you guys. Change of managers, players, and etc. So I don't know. I don't have a definite answer for you. I mean, I can only imagine it's frustrating for you, but I'm enjoying it.
It always seems like, the way I can sum it up from a United perspective is like, when he plays for United, it's like his job. When he plays for France, it's like he's playing over the park with his mates, and it's just more of a hobby. Like, he seems so much more relaxed for France to be able to do like what makes him a great player. What you saw at Juve with that free reign role. I know you expect a lot from midfielders, and Paul Pogba, like at moments, a lot of people label him as a box to box midfielder, but then he does have moments under United where if he doesn't track someone back, then you can just feel like the frustration from fans just all on top of him. And I definitely think that the mentality that he has at United just seems so completely different, as to like he's got the weight of the whole club on his shoulders at times. I think maybe now with Fernandes coming in and the new big signings since he joined are now starting to come through, maybe with that potential Sancho transfer as well, that he might start to lose some of that expectation and responsibility, and potentially, I don't know, produce some better football, really, or more consistent football, sorry, should I say.
But it has a lot to do with the harmony as well. I mean, people always trash talk Deschamps for why he picks certain players, but it is because of the squad harmony, which has been a huge part of his success. Winning the World Cup and leading up to that win as well. That squad harmony has probably been our biggest weapon. And Pogba has been such a huge part of that as well. And I think that also is a difference between United and France. It's a very happy harmony in France compared to United.
Yeah.
Just give him back to us and we will fix him at Juve,
Yeah, it does feel like he potentially needs a move, doesn't it? But yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that most people are backing France to come through that particular tie. which then leads us on to their potential opponents. So that game in Bucharest, and it's the winners of the match in Copenhagen, where we see Croatia host Spain. Josh, on this one, any particular feelings or thoughts behind these two sides? Croatia kind of slipped in the back door in third place after beating Scotland, and Spain largely kind of missed 101 chances in the first two games and then blew away probably one of the worst performances we've ever seen from a team in Slovakia.
Yeah, it was like buses with Spain waiting for a goal, and 5 come at once. It was interesting to see that maybe they found their groove, but again, it could be more down to their opponent. And this could be a really interesting game. I think because Croatia, they're not where they once were. I mean, coming third out of a group with England, Scotland, and the Czech Republic in is kind of speaks volumes, I would say, about how much they have changed since runners up in the World Cup. So I think it's kind of a difficult one to call, because we've seen Spain, kind of huff and puff, and poor Morata just doesn't seem to be able to score in most opportunities that he has. So I think this one could be tighter than expected. Then again, Spain might have now just found their gear, and I'd feel very sorry to be supporting Croatia in that one if the Spain that we've just seen turn up again.
It does sort of feel a little bit like this Spain team are just quietly going about their business. And like you say, if they actually find the goal train, there's so much potential in there. Even though it doesn't look on paper like a great squad, there's enough there if they can find a goal scorer.
Yeah, this game has got either 0-0 or 4-0 written all over it. It's one of those.
Yeah, I totally agree. Lana, I want to get your thoughts on this one as well, because I know you've sort of seen a fair bit of Morata at Juve. Like, what's gone wrong for him, and does it have to go right for him for Spain to progress in this tie?
Everyone's like bashing him, but for Juve, he's great.
It's weird, isn't
it? He's really good. I mean, he was shocking at Chelsea. Didn't really hit it off at Atletico. At Madrid, it didn't go well. But it's just the environment. Whenever I feel like he's coming home to Juve, and the fact that Allegri is back now as well, will bring the best out of him. So it's really difficult to pinpoint where it exactly goes wrong, because you would assume he would do well playing for his country, but it's just, I feel he's the most unlucky guy in the world, because either he can't stay on side or he just misses penalties, or this guy only performs whenever he wears black and white, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? And as for Croatia, I think it's fair to say, sure, there's an aging squad, but there's still enough quality in that particular lineup that if they hit the straps at the right time, then they could cause Spain an awful lot of problems. Over to the other side of the draw, then, Tom. Let's start with you on Sweden-Ukraine. On paper, it's one of those games that doesn't look the most thrilling in the world, if we're being kind, but Sweden obviously beating Poland 3-2 in their final game. They actually topped that group, rather surprisingly to some. They've got a couple of very sort of exciting young talents and players that are very much in form. Forsberg getting a couple of goals. Isak looks tasty. And then there's Ukraine, who, they've kind of shown flashes, haven't they? They've shown that little bit of a glimpse of talent and potential future, but they're kind of hard. It's kind of hard to see how this game is going to be anything other than a fairly tight, cagey affair with maybe one of these sides getting through by the odd goal. Or am I wrong? What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I think it's the prior. I think it will be a game that's overlooked by a lot of people. They'll see it on the telly and they'll be like, "Man, I'll give it a miss," and then you'll have a look at the score afterwards, and you'll realise it's either gone extra time or penalties with a few goals involved in it. I definitely think it's one that, say, if you're looking for immense quality on the football field, I think they've got some good players, especially in the Sweden squad. Like you mentioned, Forsberg, he bagged a couple of nice goals in their last game. I think Ukraine are a little bit maybe lacking in quality in some areas in comparison to Sweden, but with teams like these guys, what they lack in quality, they a lot of the time make up for in work rate, effort, and just the all-round passion that they give a game. And hence, normally we can see these kind of upsets. So whichever team progresses, it wouldn't surprise me if they cause a potential upset for the game, which is awaiting them between England or Germany. So I think it'll be a game that it'll be more hipsters that will be tuning into it. Rather than
us?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. As individuals rather than the standard football fans. But I definitely think it'll be one that it wouldn't surprise me if it's a last minute extra time goal for one particular team that maybe creeps it as a 2-1 or a 1-0. So I definitely don't think it's one that should be overlooked too easily.
No, I agree. And before we go on to the inevitable, I can see Josh is warming up on the sidelines, ready for the next game. But before we do, Lana, Sweden's close to your heart and indeed mine. They've been pretty impressive, haven't they? I mean, I know there's been a bit of this label of boring, whatever, but I mean, every time I've watched Sweden since 1994, I would say is the last time where they kind of opened up in USA 94. But they are just, that they work hard. They've got some individually talented players. They're very well structured. They're tactically aware. They've been pretty good, haven't they? I think they've got a bit of a raw deal so far.
You know what excites me about this team? It's the fact that they're defensively solid. Being a Juve fan, I love being defensively solid. It's like it turns me on because people, just letting in goals just makes me giving me heart attacks. The fact that they are so defensively solid is amazing to watch. And then you have 4 standout players in Kulusevski, Forsberg, Isak, and Quaison. And it's so nice to see that mix of, you still have a 36-year-old Sebastian Larsson in that midfield who, lost to the same Ukraine back in 2012 with Ibrahimovic. And now here he is again, a decade later almost, about to take his team through. So it's something very exciting about this team, and I don't think people give them enough credit. It's the fact that they pulled off a 0-0 against Spain, which was amazing, beat the upcoming 2 teams, which was, topping the group. No one thought they were going to do it. I mean, no one did except me, of course. But it's just nice to see such an exciting team, and I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I have a feeling they're going to win against Ukraine, but as Tom mentioned, it's going to be basically 2 teams sitting back, and it's going to be a fluke goal either way. But I have a feeling that Sweden might surprise us, or Janne might surprise us with his formation, God knows what, because that man is insane. And then we will beat the Germans, because obviously you guys are going out, and then we're through.
Yes, well, there you go, listeners.
It's not coming home, guys. Sorry to burst your bubbles.
It is.
No.
And just to say, dear listener, that is clearly so. The way to Lana's heart, if you want to get her going, is just talk defensive displays, and you're right in there. So there you go. Right then, Josh, you can start us off with this next one. Then England against Germany. It is coming home and all that, and 98 and all of that, 96, sorry, and oh god, there's just going to be so much. It's going to be unbearable. The game was at Wembley, first of all, and Lana's told you off pre-pod that you're not allowed to mention home advantage for any longer than 30 seconds maximum. So that's all I'm giving you on that one. But on paper, again, it's one of these games, isn't it? It could be really entertaining, really dramatic, and people could be talking about it for years, or it could be 2 fairly average teams fighting it out over a pretty poor game, and one of them goes through 1-0 with a ball in off someone's arse in the 90th minute. Which do you kind of think might be the case, and why?
I think looking at how Germany have played and how England have started games, I think if England come out of the traps, I think they can get at this German side. They seem to still be very they got a very squidgy underbelly that I think is quite easy to get at, as we've kind of seen in a couple of their games. Of anybody out of Group F, this would have been the side I wanted to face. England have notoriously been excellent at overplaying their chances against lesser teams. especially when no one has really seen them and they're given the plucky underdog thing like Hungary. That I was absolutely dreading getting Hungary, because having seen them through the group stages, you know that they've got something about them, and it had banana skin written all over it. France and Portugal, very difficult ties, but I know our Bavarian friends do not feel the same way about England, the same way that the 45,000 strong Gaminati in the stands at Wembley on Tuesday evening, who I am almost assured have booked Tuesday off work to start the booze cruise, and will inevitably be calling in sick on Wednesday or have booked it off. It's going to be a formidable atmosphere, and that's why I wanted Germany over anyone, was to play off the one thing that England, unfortunately, it has risen. Politically, we don't want to go into the politics of England at the moment, but it is something that will create a hostile atmosphere, is the politest way I can put it. And I think that's what they need at the moment, this England side, is because I think if they're against a side that, is playing either not necessarily away from home, but a neutral venue, I don't think this England side has got enough guile, or at least I don't think Southgate has got enough in him. I think he is very comfortable in the setup that he basically had in the World Cup, which was, we don't have the quality to beat the best sides, so we'll just sit back, hit them on a counter, and hope for a set play. And now England only scored twice in this group stage. Raheem Sterling with both goals, neither from set plays. I think that's an area that needs to improve. Ross is currently, flipping every table and chair and any drink, knocking it off the side like some kind of irritated feline at the fact that James Ward-Prowse didn't make this team, didn't make this squad. Absolutely rightly so. Especially when the manager comes out and says, our set plays aren't good enough, and you're like, come on, you've got that guy and you left him at home, which ironically is 60 to 70 miles away from Wembley. But for me, I'm really excited about this game. I haven't been too excited about many of the England games, mainly because of the terrible football that's been played during them. But you got to look back and say this is tournament football. And if Italy, the Italy of old had said they went through this group and they didn't concede a single goal, everybody would be, praising them. And I think there's got to be, reluctantly so, a bit of praise for the job that's been done so far. But my God, I think I speak for most, I say 90% of the England fans, that I would like to see a bit more expansive football. But I think in this one, it's kind of the derby for at least England anyway. And we don't care what performance we get, so long as we beat the Germans.
Yeah. Before I'm not going to mention any Faulty Towers puns, but no. you get the gist. Tom, what's your thoughts on this one? Because I think Lana's made her thoughts very clear. What do you reckon, Tom? I mean, is it a game that you're confident going into as an England fan? And I guess the other question I'd ask you is, do England kind of need to put in a bit of a performance in this one? I mean, will the crowd be happy with just a win regardless, or is it time where they actually sort of open up a bit and actually perform for a full 90 minutes rather than just sort of 20 minutes of each game?
Yeah, I definitely think performance is going to be key here. I think work rate, especially, there was phases in a lot of the group stage games where we looked incredibly flat and there wasn't much desire even just off the ball to press teams that had an incredible lack of quality on paper. I suppose you could say, no disrespect to the teams that we played, but this game, in terms of a spectacle, it doesn't really get much bigger than fighting against the Germans in the first knockout round, and then potentially, obviously I don't want to look too far ahead now, but having a really good crack at this. But it's just the performance. I don't want to see a really flat England team come out. And it's going to sound weird. I had a conversation with my friend the other day, and it just, I would feel more confident if England conceded within the first 5 minutes of the game than if it was 0-0 to about the 85th minute, because it always seems to take a rocket up England's backside for them to actually get working. I remember the game against Germany. When was it? It was when Frank Lampard's goal went over the line and then got disallowed. It was only when the Germans started battering us over and over again that the players were like, oh, hang on a minute, we've got to go back home and face the wrath of all the fans for another dreadful performance. So they started pulling their finger out a little bit. So in terms of performance, yeah, I really hope that they come out swinging in this one, because like Ross said, this German team is from previous years. I wouldn't look at it and say it's incredibly strong, to be honest. I think they've got a lot of weaknesses, but my God, I hope that there are certain players, Jack Grealish, one of them. I really hope Southgate doesn't fall back into being comfortable and go with a lineup that stinks of lack of confidence. I really hope that we give this game a good go, because I don't see a way in which we can play kind of a very tepid game and then the fans not get agitated and pissed off very easily, because all England fans know, like, Germany is one of the big games for England. Like, every time we seem to fall short when it comes to playing the Germans in big games, or any kind of big team, really. Whenever there's that expectation to be like, okay, we've got a half decent side in front of us now, we always seem to fall short. The World Cup was an incredibly painful moment when we almost booked ourselves tickets into the final, but we still had to go through a team that was still decent, and then we went a goal up, and then it all went tits up from there. The rest is history. So I'm praying that Gareth doesn't stick 5 at the back, play 2 holding midfielders, and then we play pump ball to Sterling or Rashford on the counter-attack, because I really feel that if this England team plays with confidence against Germany, I can't see a reason why we cannot beat them. I think it's all in the minds of the players. It's not to do with the lack of ability in that England team. I think especially going forwards, if you completely disregard the defence, the quality that we can have in that attacking line that we haven't really seen in the group stages. We scored 2 goals. One of them was a Sterling header, and the other one was a good bit of play for a very short amount of time. And apart from that, we haven't really had much else. I mean, Harry Kane, I know you'll be very quick to judge and say he's not been very good, and I'll agree. He's not been great, but I'd also say that the players behind him that were supporting him haven't been great either. So I think there's a huge amount of improvement that this England team can take going into this German game. And it's just head versus heart, isn't it? My head is saying it's going to be same old England. We'll sit back. We'll let them dominate the game. We won't keep the ball, and then they'll either beat us in extra time or penalties. Or my heart is saying, please play the players like Saka, who will go out there and will play without fear. Because in that last game, I did not expect Saka to play as well as he did, to be honest. I will hold my hands up and say he was really good in that game, when he was very tidy with the ball. And if you're looking at it from an outside perspective, you would say, why is he not starting the next one? Because there's been other players. I know I have a knack of slating Sterling at times, but he scored, fair enough. But performance-wise, he's not been great. And I think in tournament football, you've got to be cutthroat with team selection. And I can't see a reason why Saka doesn't deserve to be in that team. I know Lana mentioned it a couple of pods ago, and me and Josh we were saying, I don't think he'll play, but Gareth played him, and he made the most of it. Yeah, Lana was right, and I didn't see Saka getting a minute. I thought it would be Rashford or Sancho. I mean, I still don't know what Sancho has done to not deserve. Well, he had like 7 minutes, so he's obviously got something. Southgate's just.
I think he might have actually shat in Gareth Southgate's car or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It's the only way that I can explain it. It is a really, really strange one. Lana, are you champing at the bit there? I get the impression you wanna have a say on this one.
Oh no, it's gonna be Iceland all over again. So I'm just like preparing you guys. And by the way, Harry Kane is so shit. I cannot believe that you don't drop him. I mean,
well, that's
and stop talking
it's the
shit
problem
about Sterling. Why do you hate him? He scores. He is valuable, just as Griezmann is valuable to France. Sterling is valuable to England. You guys don't understand football. This is why you support shit teams.
Lana, we both have both the national teams we support have an issue with an aging Spurs player who's captain of their national side being undroppable purely for the fact that they have the armband.
Oh, for the love of God, don't even mention Lloris. At least
Ex-
we
I
have
hadn't-
good
I hadn't.
strikers. What do you have? Nothing. And
I've
who
got
was
Dominic
proven
Calvert-Lewin,
right
who's a
once
World Cup
again?
winner, but
Who was
we
proven
haven't
right again?
played him.
Moi. So, just prepare to, go out, because not everyone can beat the Germans, obviously, unless you're Sweden or France. So I will be ready with the tissues, Josh, and stick that home advantage up a certain place.
Nailed colours firmly to the mast. I think that one's going to be certainly going to have a lot of eyes on it, especially in the UK, and obviously the winner of that game is going to face Sweden or Ukraine, which is being played in Glasgow, I should say, and then the quarterfinal game will be in Rome, which will be interesting. I feel we should give some justice to the final two fixtures, which we'll start with the Netherlands against the Czech Republic. Josh, I'll start with you on this one. Netherlands are a mixed bag, aren't they? They're kind of fun because they're just a bit nuts. You never really know what you're going to get from them. Memphis Depay has been pretty decent this tournament. Gini Wijnaldum is this sort of different role that he plays for the Dutch has got a couple of key goals. It is kind of amusing me. I can't lie how much praise Denzel Dumfries is getting, because he is your archetypal classic fullback who can't defend but is really good going forward, so everyone assumes he's brilliant, which is kind of funny. But he's played well, but maybe slightly overhyped. And then you've got the Czech Republic, and I mean, what do you say about them? They gave England a fairly good game at Wembley last week, but couldn't find the net. They have qualified, so they're obviously one of the best three teams, but behind the main qualifiers. I mean, where do you? My kind of head says this is Netherlands to lose, but do you feel like the Czechs could be the opposition that undoes the tactical genius of Frank de Boer?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Once you mentioned who the manager of the Dutch is, there's always an opportunity for them to throw something away. But I think the personnel will overcome the Czech Republic. To say, England probably had 20 minutes worth of a good spell against the Czech Republic, and basically that was enough to see them through 1-0. We've seen the forward line of the Dutch be a lot stronger. I think any worry that you may have about the Czech team in terms of set plays, obviously everybody in England is fully aware of the season that Thomas Souček had and how dangerous he can be from set plays. But I think with three at the back, if De Ligt is still in that back three as well, I think they should have no problems with set plays and dealing with that threat from them. So, yeah, to be honest, I expect the Netherlands to get through this one fairly comfortably. But we'll have to see. Let's say head and heart, says the Dutch. But this is tournament football, and the Czech Republic could surprise everybody.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of have the look of one of those games where, I think, like we said earlier on, it could be a 4-0 or it could be a 2-2. It's just kind of hard to break down the individual players with each side and how they're going to line up. What do you make of this one, Lana? Is it? I mean, I know you have a bit of a love affair with Memphis, although he has, of course.
No, I don't.
No, you
I
don't
know
anymore.
what you're talking about. No,
he's dead to you. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Moving on quickly. Do you fancy the Netherlands to come through this one, or do you think Czech Republic have got enough to low block their way through it?
I mean, it's, as you mentioned, it's the Netherlands to lose. I mean, Depay finally started to show up. I mean, I know people have been frustrated with him. Welcome to my life as a Lyon fan. And I think, kicking off with scoring goals and everything, it should be a fairly simple one to win. But then again, we really shouldn't underestimate Czech Republic either, just because of the way they set up, the way they play, defensively solid. They're probably just going to, annoy the shit out of the Dutch and in the end capitalize on a mistake and score. Obviously, that would be great because then De Ligt can have a rest in the summer. I don't care, but
No
I'm being
bias at all.
selfish here. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's Holland. The Netherlands should win. I mean, otherwise, I'm just gonna laugh so much because then one big team out of the way clears the path for Sweden for the final.
It feels to me like the Netherlands it's another team that, as long as they're not favourites, so they're not expected to do well, they can just quietly go about their business. But the minute the pressure is on them, that's when I'm wondering, can they actually hack it? And if they get through this tie, they've got what we're coming on to in a second, maybe class as a route through, potentially all the way to the semi-finals or potentially the final. Who knows? So. Yeah, it is a bit of a strange game, this one. I'm not quite sure where I sit with it. I think probably on paper I'll go with the Dutch, but yeah, never.
It's like
never
watching Leon, though. You know, imagining them to beat a lesser team, but then they just end up conceding in the 90th minute and going out,
ruining your day. Yeah,
basically.
Comparison, actually, yeah, absolutely. And I don't feel like the Dutch have been hugely tested, apart from in that Ukraine game where ultimately Ukraine kind of shot themselves in the foot rather than the Dutch winning it, I felt. So, yeah, interesting one, that one. We'll finish with Wales-Denmark. Tom, I'm going to give you this one first of all. How does it feel to be Welsh? You know, you've got lots of people that are supporting you as an underdog, and then you draw Denmark, who, of course, for obvious reasons, Christian Eriksen and everything else that goes with that, a lot of people want to see them do well. So Wales can't really win, can they? But this, on paper, this one actually, to me, looks like a game that might be quite a lot of fun on the 26th of June, which is, of course, Saturday, isn't it, this week? So, yeah, is this one that you might be tuning a hipster eye to? Because I quite fancy the look of this one.
Yeah, I think it'll be hipsters and all. I think with everything, like you mentioned, that's gone on with Eriksen, I think a lot of people will be casting an eye over this Denmark side now, because everyone is going to want to see them go as far as possible and then lose to their own personal team, because the support that national team, you can't quantify it, but they've definitely got. You can feel the backing that team has now. And their performances, I say, they've done well so far. Denmark, they were a team. I can't remember which of you guys mentioned them to be an underdog, but
I did.
I'll mention that quickly. Yeah. Definitely mentioned Denmark.
Yeah. So
I
I
said
think
Sweden and Denmark.
And I said Denmark, and then I'll just completely disregard jumping on the Turkey bandwagon.
Yeah, so I definitely think they're a team that can really hurt whoever they come up against, and like you mentioned, Wales, with their performances in prior tournaments as well, they're going to want to try and prove a point with players like Bale and Ramsey coming towards the end of their international careers. I know they'll still have a few more years in them, but looking at that side of the bracket again, it's a really good chance for them to really push as far as they possibly can. So both teams are going to have plenty to play for here. It's just like you mentioned, the case of Wales can't come out of this game victorious either way, really.
No,
because it's either they win the game and everyone hates them, or they go home. So
yeah,
but I think it will definitely be one that I'll be tuning into 100%, just because the fairy tale story has definitely clicked with me for sure, as I'm sure it has with a lot of other people. So even though I'm obviously an England fan, I would like to see Denmark at least get through to the semi-final for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Josh, you in the same sort of thought process on this one? Because I mean, whoever comes through this, like we mentioned before, they're going to face the Dutch or the Czechs, and all four of those sides would fancy themselves against each other in a potential quarterfinal, which is in Baku, I believe. So yeah, who you pinning your colours to on this one? The Welsh or the Danish in this particular fixture?
I think for me, it's the Danes. I've got to back them since I backed them pre-tournament to do well. But Wales have got that spirit that we talk about. I don't want to kind of sound patronising when you describe how Wales play as well, because I think that's one of the things that has been noted when you talk about other home nations. It's especially for Scotland. It's kind of sickening how patronising people are about how plucky they were. But I think this Wales side, they've got Gareth Bale in it, who's got 4 Champions Leagues to his name. Yeah. And Aaron Ramsey, that we all know very well as a player. And there's a couple of others that, this is a side that kind of, as we've spoken about, especially with teams like Sweden, that they can be bigger than, the sum of their parts, and just having that bit of quality in the right place is perfect for them. They've got a guy who knows how to get into the, knows how to score goals in Ramsey, and he can be on the same level as Gareth Bale, who can then play those delightful passes into him, and vice versa as well. So they do have a team, and it's Kiefer Moore who scored their first opening goal of the tournament.
Yeah.
He's another guy who, looks to be just one to keep an eye on. And I think that's the thing, that Wales have got those big players that when you're man marking at a corner, you're expecting to go for the big names. And then it's one of those kind of smaller, lesser players that you don't really know about that is going to undo you. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting game to watch generally. And Baku will be, I would say, slightly great for Wales, seeing as they played 2 of their games there already. So presumably they're based in and around Baku. So
yeah, you never even thought about that, to be honest. Yeah, they might be familiar with just familiar with the stadium, pitch, the surroundings, and all that goes with it. That does give you a tiny edge in the modern game where the small things matter, essentially, on that particular scale. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. I think it's fair to say that the tournament is. This is kind of what the question I want to ask you all, really, as we sort of bring the preview show to a close, as it were. I want to ask you all individual if you've enjoyed this tournament, because I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. Lana, I'll start with you. What's been your kind of highlights? What have you enjoyed? And if there's been things you haven't enjoyed, what have they been?
I think what's been kind of fun to watch is the individual performances of certain players that you wouldn't necessarily expect to shine compared to the big names. Like we all expected, there was so much pressure on the likes of Benzema, Ronaldo, Bale, etc., Lukaku to, step up and be the stars. But then you have someone like Isak, who people might not be so familiar with, being such a shiny star. Someone like Locatelli being, great for Italy. I think that's been the highlight for me, watching, certain individuals being so good for their respective nations compared to players you would otherwise look to, dominate the headlines. I mean, we all expected so much of Mbappe, but so far has been a disappointment. But it's been amazing to watch someone like, Pogba control and, be that star of that French team. So I think that's been a highlight. Disappointed with France, if I may say so.
You
but
may.
It was expected. As I mentioned, I wasn't really confident going in. But we ended up topping the group by some crazy fluke. So hoping it kicks off, but it's just exciting to watch someone like Sweden who's, no one's even paying attention to them, and they're just quietly going around, about their own business and might surprise everyone. So I think it's the lesser team that's been exciting to watch more than the big ones for me.
I go along with that. Yeah, I think you're right. Like teams that you maybe don't expect to have performed have actually performed quite well, and some of them that you maybe thought would be actually pretty good have really flattered to deceive. I think that's probably fair. What about yourself, Tom? Have you had a similar experience, or anything that you've sort of really particularly clung on to? The biggest issue I've had with this tournament is I don't really like the all around Europe thing. I don't know if you've had a feeling about that, but I like it when it's just in one main country personally. But that's just me. What have you made of it?
Yeah, no, it's a different kind of emotion, I suppose, for this one compared to normal ones. I think it doesn't help that we've had so much football recently, but there's always an excitement for me watching these kind of international tournaments, as Lana said, to keep an eye out for players who you've not heard of. I think it's Donyell Marland for the Netherlands. I've heard a lot of whispers about him that he's potentially a very good player, and then it's always good to then see them on a big stage and see how they perform. And I'll never lose that interest in looking at young players that almost pop out of the blue. I think I mentioned it on a couple of pods, especially like the Netherlands are renowned for it, and even players in like the Italy team that people wouldn't have even heard of. All of a sudden, after this tournament, if they play the way they are and continue to, it can almost pave the rest of their career for the near future. Similarly, with like the best example I can think of is like when Hal Robson-Kanu pretty much saved the latter end of his career with 5 seconds worth of football. So I think it's in terms of the bigger picture of things, it's not. I don't know why. I don't think I've found it as gripping. Normally, it's a case of I'll almost make it an objective to watch as many games as I possibly can and try and fit them in. Whereas this one, because there's been so much football this year, it's been a case of I'll watch the ones that I feel are going to be the most exciting ones, rather than almost get up for a buzz of every single game. But I mean, it's always painful with knockout football with England anyway. So it's always nice to. I've learned to find positives in other areas of football in international level anyway. But I think going into the later stages, I think my interest will grow again, especially if England actually beat Germany. Then I'll be glued to that as per usual. The It's Coming Home brigade, I'm sure, will as well. But I think. It's a different one. I wouldn't say I'm bored of football particularly, but that 110% interest in every single game for international football at the moment for me isn't currently there. So I'm more keeping an eye on the micro things, so like the potential young players and like the Hollywood story, like with Denmark now, for example. I'm more glued and engaged to that kind of stuff rather than the bigger picture of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, and I'm completely with you on the whole. We've just, I think, particularly because of the whole lockdown situations around the world for the past 18 months, and this essentially football being forced down our throats. Yeah, of course, we want to see football, but eventually, if you get too much of a nice thing, you do kind of go, actually, I kind of want a bit of a break from all this, and we're not going to get that, of course, because we not only do we have the Euros, then we have pre-season, we're straight back into club football, and then of course we've got a World Cup in the winter, so it's all go. Josh, your thoughts on it? Have you felt much the same as myself and Tom and Lana, of that kind of all footballed out thing, or have you actually been glued to the majority of the games?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think it's like a breath of fresh air, to be honest, to see this. So if I can say so myself. It's been great. I kind of like I think I've always been a fan of international football. That's one thing I should probably caveat this with. Seeing this, I think, because we've come off a season which has basically been watching your club side for 60, maybe more games. You basically watch 2 seasons of football condensed into 18 months. And I think that has jaded a lot of people. You can even see it in a lot of journalists in their writing, in a lot of their takes as well. They can tell that they're really jaded because there's some dodgy opinions coming out now from normally sensible people. But for me, I've enjoyed this. I don't necessarily see the problem or necessarily notice, being in different parts of Europe for each of these games. I think there's obviously an underlying thing that we're not sure exactly the full extent of advantages by this. I do feel like, some teams have been mugged off by the placement of where they are for their group games. Like the Welsh fans having 2 games in Baku is certainly not close for them to get out to, really. And I think that's going to be, for the match going fan, I think this might be a tournament that isn't as exciting as it could be, because it is very much a case of can I get to the next game? What are the rules of the country going in? F1 coming up closer to home, obviously, with England's hasn't been a problem right now, but for the potential quarter final being in Rome, well, every England fan I know who's been going to the games is waiting with bated breath to see if they will be allowed into Italy. And then if not allowed into Italy, finding ways to get into Italy, shall we say, via other countries utilising,
I wouldn't let you in.
That's fine. They'll be going via France. They'll be going via Switzerland. I can expect those to all go in.
I'm going to write to the Italian Prime Minister to, just ban all English people at the borders, since you guys are so fans of doing that.
I wouldn't expect that anything less from them to do that, because to be honest, I'd be doing exactly the same if I was Boris Johnson. I would have been closing the border to Germany as soon as we were, as soon as the tie was announced. I wouldn't be letting any Germans in, just to make sure, and that's the kind of level of pettiness that I hope to see from everybody else, because it's the level I would stoop to.
I don't know why people don't want to see loads of 20-stone bald middle-aged men shouting rubbish in another country.
Who wouldn't want to see that? I mean,
exactly.
Who wouldn't want that?
I feel like we've done, I'd
rather go blind.
Exactly, we've done everybody a favour. If this was in one single country and in one single potential city, you'd have to put up with all the England fans. At least we've done the dutiful thing and kept ourselves to our own country this time around. So
would you like a medal for that?
Yeah, the cafe owners of many alfresco dining places around Europe are very happy that England fans were not descending on their town.
They've kept their plastic patio furniture intact for a summer.
Exactly.
I tell you what, I know it's slightly off topic, but imagine what people are going to be like. What particularly, shall we say, the rowdy nations are going to be like when we go to Dubai and Qatar for this World Cup. That's going to be quite the experience, I would
you're
suggest.
going to get thrown out.
Exactly.
They're going to come back missing limbs, I think. If they're, if they're not
and I'm going to be front row filming everything.
They don't put up with much shit in those sort of countries.
No, they don't.
That will be interesting to see. Obviously, that's a year away, but stay tuned.
I wonder how many Brits will be jailed. My money's on at least 1,000. Maybe.
I think they've done well if they keep their lives, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it might be worse than jail if some of them have behaved the way they have done in the past, but that's for another podcast. So as we wrap up tonight, then, of course, I have to ask all of you your winners and why. But in the interest of time, I'm going to give you all 1 minute, not 1 minute, second, or anything more. You're all going to get 1 minute to give me your winners and your reason briefly as to why. Who am I going to test first? Lana, I'm going to give you that test first. Your 1 minute begins now.
Who's going to win the final or the fixture they're playing with? Or
the tournament.
The team?
Your overall winner of the tournament.
France, just because I feel there's less pressure on them now, given that no one's going to rate them because of the way they performed. But I think the draw against Portugal will spring them to go on and just conquer every team on the road to the final. And we're going to crush you if you come to the final. God, we're going to beat the shit out of you. Mbappe's going to, spin in circles
turn up
around.
And not be offside.
Yeah, that's Morata's job.
Poke the bear. I'm impressed.
Maybe Kane can learn to run.
Now.
We can all hope. We can all hope.
Don't think that's likely to happen anytime soon.
England and the final in the same sentence was hope enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's not run before we can walk here. Josh, you're up next then. Your minute begins now.
Okay, I'm going to go short and sweet with no interruptions. England, because it's coming home.
Oh, you stole my line.
God.
Oh my God. I hate you all.
Good Lord. I thought I'd escape it just for one night, but no, absolutely not. So, and now your real answer?
I'm not really sure, mate. My real answer. I thought that would be enough.
I could avoid it. Real answer.
Real line, I'll go Portugal.
Screw you.
Portugal, Italy is going to be a hell of a quarter-final.
Interesting. I would agree with that. Could potentially be a very good quarter-final. Tom, wrap us up. Who is your winner and why?
So Josh stole mine, so I'll keep it sensible. So yeah, I think Italy for me. I think from their performances so far, I think the main test will come in their next game in the quarter-final, whether it be Belgium or Portugal, and then we'll really see what this Italy side's about. And mainly because whenever I see them blast the national anthem out, you know that their players are going to give absolutely everything. Even George Chiellini, I'm surprised he has a voice at the end of the football games with the amount of noise that comes out of his mouth during the national anthem is quite scary. So yeah, I'm going to go with I'll go with Italy for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see John Welsh punching the air from here as he's very much on the Italy train or bandwagon, whichever one you want to select from that fine group of statements or labels, I should say. But yes, I of course, listeners, you of course want to know who I think will win it. I don't see anyone stopping Ukraine at this point, so they're clearly the tournament favourites. But yeah, I mean, head over heart and all that jazz. I still think France are the team to beat because I still think they're the best team in the world on their day. But I still will stick with my original sort of dark horse or team to watch or team to fear. I think of Belgium, and I don't even really know why at this stage. I just got an inkling that they'll be tough to beat, and I think that they will actually get through the Portugal tie. And as we've just mentioned there, I think there'll be quite a test for Italy. So yeah, Belgium I'm going to stick with them until they go out, and then of course I will change my views. So yeah, there you go. Right, fantastic. Well, that was very good. Boys and girls, thank you very much for all of our listeners for tuning in. I know we don't necessarily kind of advertise these pods, so it's a little bit hard for you to get questions in, but I think all four of us are available via the fantastic means of Twitter, unless it's abuse, of course, and then we just won't respond. But you can abuse us if you want. I mean, if you've got nothing better to do. But if you have got a genuine question and you wanna sort of bring it up and maybe mention a few things or create some talking points for us all ahead of our next pod, then please do drop us a tweet and we will do our best to get those booked in for you. And if cars would stop going past my drive, maybe we could get to a lot more of those because it's very noisy here. I do apologise, listeners. But we will aim to be back. We're not going to promise because that went wrong last time. But the plan would be to do some form of pod after the second stage. Josh, you're my man with fixtures. Is there a break before the quarterfinals, or are we straight in?
There's at least a break for the first of July is at least there. I'm not going to work out if there's 30 days in it, but there's no game on the 30th, and I don't know if there's a 31st either. There
isn't the 31st of June. I can confirm that. So,
there we go. Yeah. So we've got another 2 days to try and slide it in just before we kick off again. St. Petersburg on the 2nd with the winner of, well, either France, Switzerland, Croatia or Spania.
Fantastic. Don't jinx it. So yeah, in that case then, the plan would be, loosely planned in air quotes, to do another pod in between those fixtures ending in the second stage and the quarterfinals beginning, where of course naturally we shall all get around the table once again and fight our corners as to who's going to win it, and hopefully we'll no longer have to hear Josh talk about the idea of it coming home. So I think we can all say we look forward to that day. Sorry, Josh, I couldn't help myself. You got in first. I wanted to finish it. Right, that will draw us to a close then. Thank you, as always, for listening. Thank you to Tom. Thank you to Lana. Thank you to Josh. Thank you all very much.
It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me, mate.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So if we can keep our pod together and we don't all scratch each other's eyes out over potential allegiances, we'll be back after the second stage. Until then, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. We've been the Football Hipsters, and we'll speak to you very soon.